What are you going to be before you know who you are, really?
I didn't work out what I wanted to do with my life until I was about 27. In a world where we've all got a supercomputer in our pocket with everything in the world on it, it's differentiating information, analysing information is more important than knowing facts. The water that young people are swimming in is working against them in terms of their mental health. As teachers are under so much pressure with time and resources and the rest of it, is the agility to actually see what that child needs and respond on a kind of ad hoc basis. Your academic performance depends on your brain being well. Sometimes I'm in favour of a ban for social media for under 16s. I always arrive at the conclusion that actually we need to rip up the curriculum that was created in 1980 when the world was radically different. Yeah. Start again.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Grade. We have a really inspiring guest that we're going to be speaking to today, Natasha Devon, who is a fascinating person to speak with. She's done so much I've had to make notes. She's a polymath. She's a writer, a broadcaster, a campaigner. Since 2008, Natasha has been visiting so many schools and events around the world, delivering talks and conducting a lot of research on mental health and related issues. Her body image workshops have won her a government-affiliated award. Natasha has also authored a number of books for young people, non-fiction and fiction, and there's some great titles here, including Yes You Can, Ace School Without Losing Your Mind, and Clicks, How to Be Your Best Self Online. So we thought Natasha would be the very best person to have a really interesting conversation with, to see how we can truly help children and young people manage their well-being, positive mental health, and how to stay safe online. I hope you enjoy this. To start us off, I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional journey to date, really, and what led you to focus on young people's mental health.
It was, like a lot of people, I think, that are working in this space, it was having my own experience of mental health issues that led me into this. And I grew up during an interesting time when mental health was being discussed, but it was being portrayed in quite a sensationalized and almost a glamorized way. We had that big film, Girl Interrupted, and it was also a period in history where there was a trend for people coming in and doing the assembly where they shared their story. And whilst I think that can be incredibly powerful, the way that our mental health education was delivered, it wasn't particularly relatable, one. And secondly, in particular, the eating disorder stories, I think verged on making them appear aspirational in some way. And so with my own journey with mental illness, which included eating disorders, but anxiety has been the big thing that has underlied my experiences. I wanted to, first of all, for it to be driven by what pupils were asking for and what they were encountering day to day. I wanted it to be really practical so they could take away tips. And whilst I do use my own experience where it's applicable, and it's normally just a nod to let them know that, you know, I have been through this, I wanted to do something that showed them that you can live alongside mental illness and normalize it, not glamorize it, right, not make it look like something that you need in order to be artistic or glamorous or whatever it is, but just have a life, you know, where you're happy if you manage the symptoms, you know,
and be your authentic self, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fascinating. And you do a lot of work in schools, I know that. Could you tell us more about the work that you do with pupils and staff and what that typically looks like in practice? What does it look like?
So everything that I do is informed by, I do focus groups with 14 to 18-year-olds. Right. And I ask them to reflect on their PSHE or whatever it's called in their school. Tell me what was missing, if there's a lesson they would have loved they didn't get. Or sometimes there'll be lessons they did get, but they felt that it wasn't taught in the correct way or it wasn't handled right. And I just get them to tell me about those experiences. And what I will very quickly find is that there are trends. So I do these focus groups all over the UK in different types of schools, but you'll see that there are commonalities in the experiences
Right.
that young people are having. So based on that, I then have a team of experts in all kinds of scientific disciplines, psychology, psychiatry, neuroscience. But I create these lesson plans based on what young people told me they wanted more information on.
Very good. Right. Yeah.
And then I have the experts look at to check that I'm being scientifically robust.
That's a great process, and it means that what you're saying can be, and I'm sure it can be trusted. It's research backed, it's evidence based, but also it's based very much on what they want to talk about, isn't it? So it's almost
Yes,
their agenda in a way.
it's their agenda, and my
Yeah.
job is to translate the
Yeah.
science into something that's hopefully entertaining for them.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. It must be. And incredibly useful and empowering for them, I suppose, on the
I
back of your
hope so.
workshops.
That's what I hope people would say about them, that they are useful. Because
Yeah.
I think there, again, I have this conversation a lot with colleagues of mine that work in the wellness space. There are a lot of people out there who are just saying stuff. And
Yeah.
the words resonate because what they're saying have these very broad truths that a lot of people can relate to.
It sounds plausible. Yeah.
It sounds plausible. And then the next question becomes, okay, but what are we actually going to do about that?
Yes, exactly right. Take action. Um, there's often confusion, I think, maybe between well-being, the terms well-being and self-care, and others. How do you define these terms, and why is it important that schools and students understand the difference?
So I think Andrew Cowley in his book, The Wellbeing Toolkit, defined
Yep.
this really well. And I'd really
Yeah.
recommend, particularly for leadership teams, to read that book, but anyone working in education, really, it's a great book. But he sets out this stool really well, where he said that we've conflated well-being and self-care. So
Oh yeah.
what that might look like in a school setting is you have this incredibly pressured term where staff and pupils are all really feeling the heat. And then it's broken up by what is called Wellbeing Week, but is
It
actually
is.
Self-Care Week. And,
It is.
someone comes in and does a yoga class, and maybe someone like me comes in to do a talk. And, depending on the budget of the school, they might ship some puppies in for everyone to play with. And then after that week, it's right back to that incredibly pressured environment. That's not well-being in any meaningful way.
That's so true.
Well-being is a sort of structural thing. So it's stuff like, having good policies in place for bullying, for example, that are pupil led. That it's not just a statement on a website, but it's informed by what the young people want, and they know that it will be actioned appropriately.
Yep.
It's having good policies for staff on pregnancy loss and parental leave and menopause, and these really, actually, it's quite dull well-being, but incredibly important, and it's baked into the structure of how any
Got it.
organization
It
functions.
is. It's I don't like the phrase, but it's sort of built in rather than bolt on, isn't it? In a
Yes.
particular week, it's built in, and for that, I suppose you're working with the staff to give them the tools and the routines and the tips that they need for it to be sustainable. I suppose, isn't it? Really,
Well, the kind of
or is that
stuff
a
that I,
separate?
yeah, with staff, what I'm trying to give is how you weave well-being into the curriculum in a way that is cost effective
Yeah,
and also time effective, because that the
yeah.
one thing that schools don't have a lot of right
So
now
true. It's so
is
true.
time. And there are simple ways, there's more and more expectations being put on teachers to address things like social media literacy, critical and scientific literacy that you need to survive the online world, as well as taking care of mental health, et cetera, et cetera. There are relatively simple ways that you can spend 5 minutes on that in other lessons so that they're getting this consistent messaging throughout their education,
Got it.
not one form time where we talk about this.
Exactly right. Exactly right. There's a lovely quote which I've no doubt you'll know well. I think it's Eric Jensen, actually, the American educationalist and psychologist, who says, "How we feel is what's real. It's the link to what we think." And I love that. And yet, so often, and it's no one's fault, it's just the way it seems to be, that there's this sort of false dichotomy, this arbitrary sort of choice between let's be academic focused or let's be pastoral focused and holistic and focus on what, well-being and self-care and so forth. But the two are not in any way mutually exclusive. They're completely linked, aren't they? Completely
I was
linked.
just talking to some people about this morning because
Yep.
something that I was hearing a lot in the focus groups was children are receiving generally, I would say, quite a good mental health education these days.
Do you think
But
improved in the last few
yes,
years?
I think that their ability to put what they learn into practice is not always there, but
Got it. That's the
academically
difference.
they understand a lot. What's happening is they're coming up to exams and it's all being thrown out the window. They're going,
Isn't it?
I'm not getting enough sleep, but that's good because it means I'm studying really hard. And I've given up
you're
all
right.
of the activities that support my well-being. I've given them up because I've got GCSEs and they're more important. And I said to them, look, they're symbiotic. It's if
They are.
you are looking after your mental health, that improves your ability to focus, concentrate, retain information, think
Absolutely right.
creatively,
Bang on.
problem
Yep.
solve. Your academic performance depends on your brain being well.
It
So
does.
it's not an either or. And I think more broadly in not just education, but in society, we need to understand that.
Absolutely beautifully put. So true. It's so true. But as you rightly say, at certain times of the year, particularly in schools, the examinations, the academic focus, the need to get those academic qualifications shoots up in terms of order priorities and even rises above those other things which ultimately actually affect your grades, affect your performance. Bang on. Thank you for that. So school culture, I mean, that's a nice sort of segue really into the invisible curriculum, if you like, the hidden curriculum of that doesn't tend to sort of reside in textbooks and exercise books. It tends to be in corridors and kitchens and dining rooms and so forth. The school culture clearly plays a huge role in young people's mental health. From your experience, what aspects of school culture have the biggest impact, and how can schools be more intentional with their culture, intentional in creating a positive and supportive environment? Presumably you talk about school culture a lot, I should think.
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing for schools to understand is that if you're going along with the default, the water that young people are swimming in is working against them in terms of their mental health. And so
What
you're
do you mean?
not,
That's such an interesting way of putting it.
yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well,
The
what I
water they're
mean is,
swimming in.
so for example, if you, let's take exam stress, since we were just talking about it. If you ask teachers where exam pressure is coming from, they will blame
Yep.
parents. If you ask parents, they will blame teachers. If you
Right.
ask young people, they will say, actually, it's me. This is self-perpetuating. It's something they've learned from the culture that we exist in the West, where we're told that our productivity is our value and our achievements are what define us. And that the longer we're working, the harder we're working and the better person we are. That we learn that from a really early age.
Didn't we just? Didn't we just?
Yeah. And that's
And you're going
where
to say that's a myth?
of course it is. Of course it's a myth. But it's that's what you're fighting then as parents and
Yep.
as educators.
Yep.
Neutrality is not an option because the world works so hard to convince them of those very toxic myths. You have to be the antidote to it. And I think understanding that is the first step, really. That I mean, I think the first thing I notice when I go into a school is what the relationship between staff and pupils is like.
Yeah.
You know, are they chatting
You can
to
feel
each
it.
other? And sometimes you feel like there's a bit of a show being put on where the teachers are like, hello, Tom. How was your weekend?
And the
Really
students are
good, miss.
thinking,
Thank you. Yeah, really good. And I'm like, okay, this conversation
yeah,
doesn't happen every
no,
week.
you can tell.
But
You
you
can
can
tell.
tell, you know.
She's being nice to me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think that's pretty important. I think you
Yeah.
can tell the nature of the leadership and how
Yeah.
free staff feel
Yeah, you can.
to practice that kind of holistic well-being,
Yep.
throughout their classroom practice. But I also think what's really important about the culture of school is that young people have room to fail, make mistakes, and that those things are in a growth mindset, Carol Dweck type way,
It is, isn't
treated
it?
as
Yeah.
learning experiences, and they're not punished for those
And
things.
do you mean And because I agree with that completely, that it should be the safest place to make mistakes, actually. And do you mean not just mistakes in your exercise book, mistakes in tests? You mean mistakes socially, emotionally, in terms of how
Yeah,
you're interacting?
all kinds of mistakes.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that they should go without consequence where the
No,
harm to
no.
others has been done. I
Yeah.
just mean that they should be treated as a learning experience.
As a learning
Okay,
experience.
how are we going to
Yeah.
help you move on to the next stage so that this is not repeated?
And I suppose in that respect, I'm guessing here, I'd love you to confirm, but I'm guessing that perhaps like me, you lean towards a positive, restorative approach to behavior rather than a straight punitive one in terms of
Yes,
how we
although
manage.
young people are different and and they
Yeah, they are.
respond to different things.
They are.
And I worked out because I used to think that I went to as close to a perfect school as you could get
Did you?
because I loved school. I loved school
Yeah, I did.
so
I
much.
loved school.
And then I spoke to some of the people that were not just in my year, but in some of my classes, in my form, who didn't think much of the school that we went to at all.
Same school. Yeah.
Same school, same
Mm,
teachers, same day-to-day experience.
yeah.
And I realized that the school I went to was perfect for me.
Right.
And you need to be able to be quite agile, really. And that's what's missing because teachers are under so much pressure with time and resources and the rest of it, is the agility to actually see what that child needs and respond on a kind of ad hoc basis.
Oh, that's so well observed. It's the old sort of Victorian model of standardization, isn't it? Quality assurance, almost mass production. There isn't always the time and the resources and the space to tailor, to customize, to personalize, to individualize. And that's so interesting that the same school that really held your engagement and you felt positively about, others didn't.
It's so
Fascinating.
interesting to me because
Fascinating.
school was my favorite place to be. I used to make excuses to try and stay in school for longer. And I used to stop my teachers because I went back to my school recently and I told them what I was doing. And some of my old teachers were still there, sort of on the verge of retirement now, but, just in their last year or whatever. And they went, well, yeah, of course, obviously, that's what you're doing.
They
That
weren't
you,
surprised.
yeah, you are
Wow.
using everything that we could see in terms of your potential. But they all said the thing that they remembered most about me as a pupil is that after school I would stop them, as they were leaving or in the corridor and be, I was thinking about that thing that you said earlier. And they said it was so exciting to have a learner like that who would actually go away and think about what you said and ask you further questions about it. The idea that you could just go somewhere and learn interesting stuff all day. I wish I could just do that forever. But unfortunately, at some point you have to earn
But it's
money.
but it's really interesting because clearly your success, your influence, your reach, your position, your work is not, I'm sensing, driven by a bad experience of school that you don't want other people to go through. It's driven by a positive experience. So what motivated you to, what drove you into this then?
I think a lot of my pastoral needs were met through my teachers having a lot more autonomy and time and breathing space than teachers have now.
Oh, that's
But I
interesting.
would say
Right.
my PSHE wasn't
Yeah.
great.
No, no,
Specifically,
mine
that's the
wasn't.
only real part of my school experience that I have a complaint about, really. There
Really.
was definitely
Looking
room for
back.
improvement there. Yeah.
Yeah, sort of, if you're lucky, 11 o'clock on a Thursday isn't really enough, is it? It's back to that built in or bolt on, isn't it? It wasn't
Yes.
part of the culture, really. It wasn't baked in. Um, Interesting. So there's lots of discussion, my goodness, there is, about the impact of social media. That's an understatement on mental health. And I know this is another area of your specialism, really. So what advice would you give to young people and to schools to help them enjoy social media while protecting their well-being and their sense of self?
Well, the first thing I would say about that is my views about social media have changed dramatically in the past 2 years. So when I
Right.
wrote
Why
that
is that
book,
then?
Clicks,
Yeah.
I still thought that it was possible to use social media platforms in a way that was smart and avoid certain content or certain bad experiences. And it's not that that wasn't true when I wrote the book, it was. It's that the social media platforms have become less regulated. and that algorithmically are, depending on what you're talking about, there are certain sites that are pushing radicalizing disinformation. There are
Right.
certain sites that are encouraging particularly girls towards self-harm and eating disorder behaviors,
Right.
and boys towards misogyny.
Yeah.
And
That's
that
got it.
has become much worse since I wrote that book.
It has.
So I'm, depending on what day you ask me, sometimes I'm in favor of a ban for social media for under 16s.
Right.
Every expert I talk to is not, I should say. And I know a lot
Really?
of people that work in the tech space. But sometimes I think, do you know what? It's the only solution to all of this is to just turn it off for them.
Mm,
My concern about that, though, is that we then forget that at 16, they will start to have these experiences and we
they
need
will.
to prepare them for that.
To prepare them, to teach them for it. Yeah.
And I think the most important thing is the scientific literacy skills. So things like source checking,
Yeah.
reverse image searching, understanding the difference between correlation and causation,
Yeah.
how to spot grifting,
Yeah.
how to seek out reputable health advice, all of this stuff, super, super important.
And you have to teach that in context. It's difficult to teach that without referring to social media, I suppose, isn't it? That's the
I don't know if that's true because what's really interesting is people of my age and older who didn't grow up with
mm,
social media, those of us who have a degree are far less vulnerable to radicalization, fake news, etc. That's not because we're cleverer. It's because what you learn in a degree, even if it's an arts degree like I did, you learn how to really do your own research, not sit on the
you're
loo
right.
watching YouTube videos, do your own
Whatever the
research, but
context.
actually do your own research
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the things I was talking about, correlation and causation, source checking, fact checking, that kind of stuff. And so if you have those skills, clearly there's an armor there against some of what's
You
going
can
on
apply
social
them.
media. We need to
Yeah.
start introducing that much, much earlier in the education experience.
Do you have any friends or colleagues in Australia? I wonder how that will play out, given
I am
what they've
so
done
keen
there.
to, yeah,
It's
it's
going
going
to be
to
interesting to
take,
see, isn't it?
yes. And the problem with social media research
Yeah.
traditionally has been that, like, for example, in 2016, there was this brilliant paper that was published that showed the impact on teenage self-esteem and body image of Facebook use. And they started researching that in, I think, 2011. And by the
Wow.
time it
Gosh.
was
Right.
thoroughly researched and peer reviewed and all the rest of it,
Yeah.
teenagers were not, no one, no teenager is on Facebook now, and they weren't in
By the time they
2016.
find, wow, gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would be really interesting to see what the research shows about just taking them off all the platforms altogether.
Yeah. Yeah. And it will take time to gather that research, that data, won't it?
Robustly,
And
yes.
robustly. And times will have moved on by the time it's published. I suppose that's the point.
Yeah, and I think one of the big concerns that I'm hearing about is chatbots, that particularly neurodivergent children are developing an emotional reliance on things like ChatGPT and not only using them for a source of information, but also
Mhm.
using them almost in a kind of parasocial way as a friend or feel like they have a relationship with them.
Yeah.
That's
Understood.
looming on the horizon.
Yeah. That is. That is. So, building on your point around digital literacy and critical thinking, then, how can schools realistically make time for these skills in an already busy curriculum so that they're genuinely embedded rather than bolted on?
I think there's lots of things that you can do. I think so. For example, in science is the most obvious place where you
Yeah.
can do this. Teaching young people that because there's you hear online a lot. Well, the science says this, and you can't argue with it. But
Mm,
then you think, well, you don't understand what the science is if you're saying that.
mm,
And also, I think it's important that they know because most people stop studying science at GCSE
mm.
that what they're learning is correct, but if they went on to A level and degree and masters and PhD, there would be layers of things on top that would make it more complicated. And
They would.
the more you know, the more complicated it gets, right?
That's true.
So, so a really good
Yeah,
example
it's
of
true.
that would be like the whole sex gender debate. You know,
Yeah.
when you talk to actual geneticists, they'll say this is endlessly complicated. And then you've got these people online going, well, no, there's some people with X chromosomes and there's some people with XY, and the whole world is divided that way, and that's the science. And you're like, well, no, actually, that's not the science. That's what you learn at GCSE, and it's kind of broadly applicable, but it's not universally applicable. So I think that would be a good thing. There's a thing that I do with them in my lessons on body image where we talk about, this is a real case study of health influencers claiming that celery juice could cure depression. And we look at the study that they're, because they're going, studies show, and it's one study, and it's polling, and it's got about 30 about 30 people took place in a poll, and those who drank celery juice said they had less symptoms of depression than those who didn't. So we look at like, okay, so is this a good bit of research? What can you extrapolate from this? What else might be going on here?
Yep.
You know, things like that. I even think that there's opportunities, definitely in history. You can ask what would happen if Goebbels had had social media,
That's right.
for example.
Yeah, that's right.
In English, you know, understanding that, and I think this is definitely done by all good English teachers and increasingly done by Disney, but like understanding that the baddie has a backstory as well. And, you know, the people that come into your life that have harmful intentions don't come in with a, you know, big sign on their head saying, I have harmful intentions. Stuff like that is more important than knowing facts.
Yeah. Isn't it just? Isn't it just? A big theme of this podcast then, Natasha, is how we prepare pupils for the experiences and responsibilities of later life. That's an overarching theme for all of these episodes. So from what you've seen and experienced, briefly, in what areas do you think schools are doing this well? And in which areas do you think we could improve? That's a big question, that is, isn't it? In terms of how we prepare them for their unique futures.
So most of my criticism, I think, is reserved for the Department for Education or the policy more than the schools. Because I think what's happening is the DFE are providing these guidelines, and then they've got this line that they say a lot. They said a lot when I was trying to work with them, which is teachers know their pupils best, so teachers should be the people to deliver this.
I've heard that a lot.
And I think, well, sometimes that's true, but other times it's beneficial to somebody to hear something that and be able to have a discussion with someone that they're not going to see in double maths the next day. And teachers don't always feel confident or competent enough to be able to deliver, these incredibly, they're often very well thought out lesson plans and very comprehensive guidelines, but there's just so much being piled on to teachers that they're expected to learn whilst doing their jobs at the same time. And it's you keep saying this thing of let's stop bolting on. Whenever I have these conversations, I always arrive at the conclusion that actually we need to rip up the curriculum that was created in 1980 when the world was radically different. Start again.
It does feel like here's some material for teaching how volcanoes are formed, or the life cycle of plants, or the water cycle. In terms of how you get along with each other and rub shoulders against each other and navigate your way to your own future. Well, teachers know best about that. So get on with it. But I think, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of people listening to this. Fascinating. Really, really interesting. Right. Every episode, we're actually just firing a few quick fire questions at you, if that's okay. We've had a lot of your time already, and I have really enjoyed your insight, your thoughts. So here we go. So what motivates you to get out of bed in the morning?
Fairness.
Fairness.
Yeah, I've got a real thing about fairness.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that one. Fairness. Yeah, love that. Great. Okay, well, we wanted short answers. We can talk a lot about that one, actually. This is a nice one, this one. So when you were 10, right, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I didn't know. And I've really thought about this. And I can't remember a time in my life where I knew what I wanted to do. I
No,
remember
I'm
being
sure I can.
told a lot at that age and throughout my secondary school career that I should be a barrister.
Yeah.
I heard that a lot, but that was chosen for me. That was not a conclusion that I arrived at by myself. I didn't work out what I wanted to do with my life until I was about 27.
How interesting. Yeah. And that's a nice message for children and young people to hear, isn't it, actually? Because it is an awful rush. There's such a terrible panic, isn't it? And it kind of filters down and trickles down to essentially year nine. What GCSE options are you going to choose? Because
Yeah.
what are you going to do? What are you going to be before you know who you are, really? That's really interesting. So it's quite reassuring and comforting to know that in your case, it wasn't really until you were sort of 27 that the ideas sort of coalesced
Yeah.
as to what you
And then
wanted to do.
I
Same
made
for
up a
me.
job based on the things that I'm good at
Did
and
you?
like doing. I
And
mean,
is
I'm so
this the job?
lucky in that respect. Yeah.
Is this the job? Yeah.
Yeah. The going into schools, and obviously there are other things that I do. I write books, I have a radio
Oh,
show,
you're
but
absolute polymath.
the
Yeah,
going into schools is the root, is the heart of everything. And
it is,
doing it
isn't
in
it?
that way with the
It is.
focus groups and stuff, I made that up.
Yeah. Wow. So, what's one lesson from school that you still use today?
So
Tie your shoelaces. I don't know what it is.
there are so many. I think I recently went, as I said, went back to my old school and did a speech for their prize giving. And I definitely believe this, that at school is where I learnt to be tenacious.
Right. Yeah.
I
Quite right.
learned that it's you just keep trying and you
Quite right.
you adjust obviously, but you keep pecking away at that thing. And there was an opportunity to do something with that. If you had an idea, you were given the room to explore that. So I definitely got my tenacity from school, but I also have to give a shout out to I have so many wonderful teachers I could give a shout out to, but
Do you?
Dr. Cochrane taught me English. And he was, because I went to school during Section 28, he was the first person who
Right.
ever said the word bisexual to me when we were studying
Really?
Shakespeare. And I
How
went, oh,
interesting.
there's a word for it. Um,
Wow.
and he was a wonderful teacher, but he did this thing called Mistake of the Month, right?
Okay.
Where he got up in assembly once a month and he explained what the mistake of the month was. And if you made this mistake in some of your work, all the teachers knew they had to put a special sort of red ring around it, and you'd made the mistake of the month.
Right.
He is
Right.
the reason that I know the difference between there, and there.
Oh, wow.
All these really
How interesting.
common
Yeah.
and fewer and less,
And you've remembered
these
it.
common grammatical mistakes that people make all the time. He's the reason I don't make them.
I love the fact that you've remembered it as well. That's fantastic. That left a lasting impression.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that he was kind as well, I'm assuming. You had a rapport with him?
I was
Or maybe not.
He was a very kind man, but he was quite fierce.
Okay.
So there are teachers that I had a real, almost like they were friends
Yeah.
relationship with. My again, another English teacher, actually, Mrs. Shepherd. She was like a big sister to me, and I felt like
Right.
I could talk to her about anything. I had a wonderful history teacher called Mr. Biggins, which is the reason that I can spot propaganda. And he was really funny and he was great, and
Marvellous. I'd love to
you just wanted to
explore
be his
that.
friend.
Right.
But Dr. Cochrane was quite. I would say I had quite a distant relationship with him.
Okay. You
I just
respect it.
want, yeah, I wanted to listen to him talk.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely right.
yeah.
Um, and what do you think is the most important life skill schools could teach? I mean, there's many, but what for you would be, or just give us one or two over and above,
Um,
life cycle of plants and photosynthesis. Do you know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah. I think collaboration is really
Yeah.
important. That it's not just
I'd
what you
agree.
know as an individual, it's what your
Yeah.
class knows, it's what your year group knows, it's what your community knows. That is important. That we're pack animals, and
Yeah.
we that's how we've evolved, and that's how we survive. And I also think I know I keep coming back to this, but it's in a world where we've all got a supercomputer in our pocket with everything in the world on it. It's differentiating information, analyzing information is more important than knowing facts.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. That's a really important life skill. And that's almost brought us back to the beginning, actually. That's a really good place to leave it, actually. Gosh, I've really enjoyed that. And we could talk for hours if we had the time. I would love to sit in on one of your workshops because I bet they're so insightful and so empowering. How very reassuring that there are people like your good self in the world and that you're working in the education sector, because there's many, many sectors you do work in, but there's many other sectors that you could work in, but you've chosen to work in education. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Great. Well, I really enjoyed that. I hope you did too. Again, we're really grateful to you, Natasha, for your time. And let's do another one soon. I wish you a really good evening. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks a lot. Bye.